World Endurance Triathlon. The event is nothing if not audacious. To run the marathon distance, but to do so after swimming more than 2 miles in Pacific Ocean water and bicycling 112 miles through an oven of hardened lava. For some, more on the strength of the will than on the strength of the body. The athletes who attempt to impose their will on this island are at the heart of something too new to be categorized, too unusual to be defined in mere words. They must be seen, and you'll see them today on ABC's Wide World of Sports.
Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of sport, the thrill of victory, and the agony of defeat. The human drama of athletic competition. This is ABC's Wide World of Sports.
Brought to you by Yamaha, motorcycles designed to be as different as the people who ride them. By Budweiser, for all you do, this Bud's for you. And by the Bic Pen Corporation, makers of the Bic Roller Pen, with a tough point that won't turn to mush. So smooth, it almost writes by itself.
This is a new Yamaha Maxim, possibly the best-looking motorcycle we've ever built. And if you think it looks good at a red light, wait till the light turns green.
When this young executive bought a house, he looked in towns where the commuter trains were reliable, smart. And when he bought a new car, he researched resale prices on the model he wanted, smart. And today, he's placing the biggest order for plain paper copiers in his company's history. He chose Savin, the company with an extensive product line and the largest service network in the industry. Smart.
I'm Jim McKay at ABC Sports Control. We have a fascinating wide world of sports for you today. However, you may have seen the World Nordic Ski Jumping Championship scheduled for today in your local listing. You won't be seeing that today. What we do have for you is Sugar Ray Leonard defending the World Welterweight Championship that he united by defeating Thomas Hearn some months ago. And we'll also have for you the Ironman World Endurance Triathlon, the finish of which is hardly to be believed, believe me. Now the beginning of the triathlon, though, our commentator in the early hours of that day, Jim Lampley.
Saturday, February 6th, sunrise on the Kona coast, the western rim of the Big Island of Hawaii. 591 men and women were huddled next to a pier in the small town of Kailua, waiting for the beginning of a day to remember. They had come from 41 states and 6 countries, following in the footsteps of others who had come before. Some of them had been on Oahu in 1979 when a California swim instructor named David Scott separated himself from 107 others during 5 hours of bicycling, then forced his body through only its second marathon run to win the event in record time, 9 hours, 24 minutes. Last year, Scott stayed home in California, and a former Olympic cyclist named John Howard took his turn at dominating the event. More than 300 others were on the Big Island to follow in Howard's path and to add their names to the growing legend of the triathlon. Like David Scott before him, John Howard declined to defend his title, but that was nothing more than a footnote, as those who would try it, those of us who would only watch, waited for 7:30 a.m. I'm Jim Lampley. When I first covered this event 2 years ago for ABC Sports, I watched with awe and disbelief as more than 100 competitors pushed into the water for the start. Now there are nearly 600 of them, and those of us who cover this event for ABC are no longer surprised by anything, which is saying a lot when you consider what they're about to do. 2.4 miles of ocean swimming, 112 miles of cross-country bicycle racing, 26.2 miles of running, the marathon. As the event unfolds, you're going to be hearing from experts in each of those 3 separate disciplines. Diana Nyad, the best known of all ocean swimmers and one of only a handful of athletes who have experienced a state of extreme physical exhaustion similar to what triathlon competitors can expect to go through. Eric Hayden, not only the greatest speed skater in the history of that sport, but an inexhaustible and rapidly improving cross-country bicyclist with a training regimen comparable to those of the athletes he has met here. Marty LaCourie, who made his reputation as a middle-distance runner, but who has also had occasion at times to acquaint himself personally with the rigors of the marathon. And to tell us in detail about the mysteries and the mystique of this mound of volcanic rock, a friend who has become the honorary mayor of the island of Hawaii, Artie Johnson.
Jim, I've been visiting the big island of Hawaii for 15 years, and every time I come here, I find something new and unique to look at. We're standing at Kailua Bay right now, one of the most beautiful bays in the United States. And the athletes are going to be confronted by something that they might not expect, which is the sun, because we have a lot of sun here. And as the day wears on, the heat may have a great deal to tell in who is going to win this particular race. But first, they have to face the fluctuating currents of Kailua Bay. They swim 1.2 miles out to an anchored boat and then back to the pier, where they shower, change clothes, and get onto their bicycles. And then they head paralleling the path used by the great King Kamehameha in the wars that ultimately unified the Hawaiian Islands. They'll ride on the highway, built over the lava fields created by the eruptions of 1801 and 1859, now black and impressive in their silence. It's at this point that the riders will be able to look to their left and see Haleakala crater on the island of Maui. Directly ahead of them will be the Kohala Mountains. And right now they're about halfway to Hawaii. But from here on in, it could be a very, very important factor. It's a wind that might be born in that little channel between Maui and Hawaii, the Alenuihaha Channel, or it could come off Mauna Kea through the North Kohala Mountains. Hawaii, situated at the end of those mountains. In Hawaii, they turn their bikes around and head back south over the same course they have just followed, down to Keauhou Bay and the hotel at the end of that bay. There they get off their bikes, put on their running clothes, and start the marathon. 26.2 miles. The combined triathlon distance of 140.6 miles is greater than the distance between Philadelphia and Washington. At Keauhou Airport, they turn around and head back to Kailua Pier, where it all began.
So that was the challenge which faced them as they stood together before the water on this Saturday morning. Teachers and lifeguards, doctors, carpenters, students, a bank president, a fighter pilot, a Las Vegas blackjack dealer, a 14-year-old boy, a 63-year-old man, all lured to this place on this morning by an event so extreme it almost defies description. In a matter of seconds, a shot from a small cannon would signal the start, and they would press into the surf. By natural selection, the strongest swimmers at the front, the slowest in the back. Anyone secure enough to enter an event like this would know pretty well where to line up. There was no need to remind them to look at the clock. It was only the beginning of a very long day, and for most of them, it was the climax of months of expectation. As they began the swim, Diana Nyad rode in a boat just ahead of them.
The best swimmers have taken off like rockets, trying to put as many minutes as they can between themselves and the best cyclists who will be chasing them later on. I imagine that everyone who has just started this grueling day is feeling an amount of relief at this moment. After months and months of anticipation and worrying and dreaming, finally the tension disappears as they get down to hard work. The ocean presents a light chop today, but nothing that will bother the swimmers terribly. Keep in mind that 65 to 75% of these competitors come from the worlds of cycling and running. And even the swimmers, for the most part, are pool swimmers, not ocean swimmers. They may not know that a light coating of Vaseline under the armpits and between the legs could prevent chafing, which later on during the cycling could be a major problem. They may not know how to take a stroke forward and look ahead to set their course without disrupting their forward speed. They may not understand that in the ocean, you should take longer strokes in order to take advantage of the saltwater buoyancy. And keep in mind that even the finest among the swimmers have some 10 hours of competition ahead of them.
Now those who watched from the beach fell silent, quite aware that their friends and relatives in the water had slipped off into another world. For the vast majority, there was no concern about how rapidly they could reach the boat with twin sails anchored far out on the horizon. All that mattered now was to be able to get there and turn around with enough strength to come back.
The amazing big roll.
As the lead swimmers prepared to make the turn at the boat marking 1.2 miles, a swimmer named W.F. McCarthy had separated himself from a small pack and taken the lead. Behind him, two familiar names from past triathlons, Kim Bouchong, a strong 11th place finisher in 1981, and David Scott, the 1980 champion, who had returned after a year's absence from the event. Earlier, Diana Nyad had gone into the water to demonstrate the proper technique for ocean swimming.
One of the crucial differences between racing in the ocean and racing in a pool is that in the ocean you must exaggerate the shoulder rotation to allow the mouth to come up for a breath above the surface chop. You must also be able to use your lead arm to occasionally press down on the water and take a quick surveying glance of the mark you are swimming toward without hindering your forward momentum. This usually requires a feel for the swells and timing your surveying glance at the top of a wave rather than at the bottom so you don't waste that forward glance and have to do it again. Now, McCarthy used a good deep shoulder rotation and he maintained about 88 strokes a minute, which was just about perfect for this distance.
McCarthy's was not a familiar face for triathlon watchers, but as he approached the pier, it was clear that he would exit the water with the lead. Though for clock watcher, time was already surprisingly slow. 2 years previously, David Scott had exited the water at Waikiki in just a little over 51 minutes. Last year, after the event had been moved here to Kona, the lead swimmer had left the water in a little over 53 minutes. This year, it would be more than 57 minutes before W.F. McCarthy walked onto the pier.
Jim, evidently all the swimming times were slow this year for two reasons. One, the water was 3 to 4 degrees colder than anyone had expected, and also there was a fairly heavy cross current carrying the swimmers off to the side on that last stretch into the pier.
Awaiting McCarthy as he exited the water, a brief shout of clothes into bicycle gear, and then the job of locating his bike in the bike rack situated just next to the pier to begin the 112-mile bicycle ride.
McCarthy's upper body looks slightly swollen, or as we say, pumped up in the vernacular. Swimming makes incredible demands on the upper body, and all of them will be tired in their arms, shoulders, chest, and back. But don't forget, the rest of this race on the bike and on the road is for the lower body, the legs.
Just behind McCarthy, a pack of swimmers exited the water in hot pursuit. Patrick Bruce, Kim Bouchong, a lifeguard from San Diego who is an excellent swimmer, but an even better bicyclist. Bill Leach, a phys ed teacher from Los Angeles. David Scott, the winner of 2 years before, and John Hobson. All of them moved briskly into the shower area with an eye toward getting onto the bike as rapidly as possible. The vast expanse of bicycles set up next to the pier was in itself an indication of how rapidly this event has grown in 2 years. An unusual thing began happening here, though. McCarthy, whom you'd expect to be in a hurry to get moving on the bike and maintain his lead, walked in an almost leisurely fashion to the bike. While inside, you can see in the right corner of your screen, Kim Bouchong was hurrying to get into his bicycle gear and get out onto the road.
Usually the lead swimmers make a break as fast as they can to get out on the road and get a lead over the great cyclists, but look at W.F. McCarthy. He was taking his time. He was lollygagging around in the parking lot. No hurry to get out there whatsoever, and it's strictly my speculation, but I feel that McCarthy's only goal for this year was to be the #1 guy out of the water and win the swimming portion of the triathlon. Now, at the top of your screen, you'll see that Bouchong came out of the parking lot and headed out on the bicycle course first because he hurried, and he evidently wanted to win this race.
It was just a little bit past 8:30 a.m., and even for most of those already out of the water, there were still more than 9 hours left. Bouchong had established a solid lead as he rolled out of Kailua into the lava fields. In a van just ahead of him, Eric Heiden outlined the challenge of the next 5 hours.
Many of the athletes consider cycling to be the key event in a triathlon. And a lot of the riders are accomplished cyclists in their own sense. They've picked up the running and the swimming as secondary sports. Kim Bouchong behind me is a top competitor in cycling in America. Jim, I had a chance to ride the 112-mile course, and it shouldn't be the hills that cause a lot of problems. I think it's going to be the heat and the high winds that are going to give everybody some problems.
Bouchong's cycle suit would have looked at home in a disco. There was every reason to believe he would feel at home in the lead.
Well, I'm doing this event mostly to stay in shape in between the bike racing seasons, and my heart's kind of in bike racing right now, and that's what I'm looking forward to, is the future in bike racing.
A part of the lonely challenge for Bouchong now would be to concentrate only on what he was doing without worrying about what was happening behind him. Well in back of him, David Scott of Davis, California, passed Dave Horning of Berkeley for second place.
These two riders have a contrast in technique. Horning was up on top of his bars, really relaxed, while Scott was down on the lower part of his bars and was really going hard.
As the lead men battled it out on the bike course, the swimmers were coming out of the water by the dozens. 17-year-old Deej O'Hara, although from snow-covered Syracuse, did not enjoy the temperature of the water, but he would resume the race and finish 537th, tied for last. Sean Wilson last year led both the swimming and cycling in the women's race, but had to withdraw from the marathon because of stepping on a nasty sea urchin a week earlier. Lynn Brooks was wincing off salt water to avoid chafing later on in the race, and hundreds of competitors bustled to take their showers, change into cycling gear, and grab something to eat or drink. A half hour behind the lead swimmers was Kathleen McCartney, here in the center of your screen in the purple. But her event, cycling, was next. Kathleen was not only a pre-race favorite, but she spoke well of what this event meant to her.
I think it can also be an inspiration to some women who think that, well, maybe a lot of women think that they can't get involved in this, it would take away some of their femininity, or, you know, people might have a bad image of them in sports, or they say, well, I don't want to get all muscular or something like that. But you can be feminine, you can be a woman, and you can also be a great athlete.
Well out on the bicycle course, the leading woman, Pat Hines, followed three men's cyclists as they made the turn up the hill toward Hawaii. Artie Johnson elaborates.
As you can see on this map, from Kailua to this point is 33 miles. And the rest of the way, 20 miles, is uphill to Hawaii. Now, this is where the winds can come into play.
On this day, a strong crosswind which bothered many cyclists both going out and coming back. But not Kim Bouchong. It was 10:20 a.m., and he had almost reached the turnaround point at Hawaii.
5 years ago, a team of Honda engineers set out to create the world's most advanced motorcycle. The result of their efforts is the Honda CX500 Turbo, a water-cooled, fuel-injected, turbocharged motorcycle systematically controlled by a digital computer. The CX500 Turbo. The only thing about it that is not surprising is the name of the company that built it.
Compare dandruff shampoos. There's good, there's better, and then there's Blue. Selsun Blue, the best dandruff shampoo money can buy. Clinical testing among leading brands proved it works best with more complete dandruff control. Selsun Blue is the only leading brand with the anti-dandruff ingredient doctors prescribe most. Remember, there's good, there's better, and there's Blue. Selsun Blue. It simply works the best.
Sunday, an underground cave-in sends Ted to the rescue.
Ted, can you hear me?
But will he return?
I'm going, I'm his brother.
Code Red. Then, when corruption kills, Nick goes undercover.
Waste of Nick, look out!
Today's FBI. Tonight.
We'll be going back to the Ironman World Endurance Triathlon in a minute. And later on Wide World of Sports, you'll be seeing Sugar Ray Leonard's defense of his world welterweight title against Bruce Finch. It took place in Reno, Nevada, and in fact, it was the first championship fight in that city since 1910 when Jack Johnson took on Big Jim Jeffries. Now, Johnson was the black world champion, modeled many years later for the James Earl Jones part in the play and film The Great White Hope. He was a great fighter. Jeffries was a huge farm boy who took off some 90 pounds preparing for the battle. Ringside tickets went for $50. The fight was scheduled for 45 rounds, but Johnson eventually got his job done in 15. Here are the ancient films of that fight. Two young boys were there that day. Their names, Tate Williams and Andrew Giannacchio. They're now 89 years old, and they were kind enough to recall the occasion for us.
We waited there so long. Remember, you waited too. We waited there so long to get up to where we paid the general admission of $5. And just as we got up there, they closed. They said they were all sold out, no place to sit down, nothing. So we're sorry, and so the gang I was with was not going to get us off of there. So we went over we climbed over. A man even reached down and grabbed my hand and pulled me up to help me get over. And he moved to one side so that I have a place to stand and watch it. It was in the third round, just finished when I got in.
Well, when I got in, it was around the fifth round. And there was four of us. I mean, the only one left, the rest of the all passed away. And I managed to get in right behind the grandstand, and I crawled up underneath until I got up there where the high-priced seats were.
I went to their training camps practically every afternoon, because I was just a kid riding on a bicycle at delivery boy. And I saw both of them at their places of training. You received no welcome from Jeffries at all. He didn't seem to want to talk to you, wondered what you kids were doing there. But Johnson was just opposite. He talked to us, and we'd ask him how he's feeling. How are you going to win? You going to win? Oh, yes, and all. I mean, the regular fight talk.
Those days, whenever the fighter that I saw, in my case, it was the first one. I never experienced one before. However, their way of going about was sort of a low motion, kind of a lot of aiming and a lot of shooting around in the different directions, so on and so forth. But whenever a fella did get hit, it was like get kicked from a horse that it hit hard. Today, they go a little faster. They're just like a boiler maker in the boiler shop that they're boom, 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 boom. However, they don't hit half as hard as they did at the time.
A couple of guys reliving the great occasion 72 years later. By the way, speaking of that modern pop, pop, pop technique, we'll be seeing perhaps the greatest practitioner of that art shortly on ABC's Wide World of Sports when we watch Sugar Ray Leonard defending his world welterweight title against Bruce Finch. We have a stock car result here. Dave Marcus won his first NASCAR victory in more than 5 years when he won a rain-shortened Richmond 400. Coming up now, and right now, as a matter of fact, we're going to return to the Ironman World Endurance Triathlon. We have a special commentator for you this time as we explore an interesting corner of the Big Island of Hawaii. Our commentator, Artie Johnson.
Well, this is another place I'd like you to see that the contestants will never see because it's about 5 miles off the course. No, this isn't a fort we're standing in. This is called the Moakini Luakini Heiau. Heiau is a religious place. It was a place where the royalty came to feast, to pray, and to make human sacrifices. It was built 1,500 years ago, and all the stones in this place came from a valley about 14 miles away. And as the story tells it, it was built between sunrise and sunset of one day.
On this one day, the clock crept toward high noon. Kim Bushong had been pedaling for more than 3 hours as he and more than 500 others built their own personal monuments to this event, yard by yard, piece by piece, across a 50-mile stretch of ancient lava fields. As Eric Hayden notes, it was getting tougher for everyone at this point.
After Bushong made the turnaround, it was apparent that all the riders were going to have a stiff headwind on the way back, like Artie had mentioned. Kim's time, or speed, dropped from 26 miles an hour to less than 20 on the way back.
Behind him in second place, David Scott was laboring too. This despite an almost inhuman training schedule.
I've been training for about 6 months, seriously. Mileage, I was averaging about 380 miles a week on my bike. Running somewhere between 55 and 70, I would vary the intensity. And swimming about 4,500 to 6,000 yards per day, 6 days a week.
This wind is murder.
Stronger than you thought?
Yeah, it's terrible today. It's really unpredictable. Unfortunately, it's the worst it's been all week, this part.
expect it to be bad down in the lava field?
It's usually better down there, right? This road's horrible.
The heat would make some competitors cranky and disoriented, but with David Scott's background and training, he was prepared for almost anything.
52-year-old Earl Varner from Tucson, Arizona, was the last swimmer out of the water. After nearly 3.5 hours of swimming, unable to support himself, legs trembling, he not only walked, he cycled the 112 miles, ran the marathon, and finished 531st out of 537.
As the clock moved past 1 o'clock, 27-year-old Pat Hines from Pacific Palisades, California, a distance swimming devotee, held the lead among women.
Pat had really good technique and looked really strong despite a nagging stress fracture she had in her foot, which she was going to have to worry about in the upcoming marathon.
14 minutes behind her on the course, a new contender had moved into second place, 23-year-old Julie Moss from Los Ojos, California.
Take a look at Julie's helmet. It's a plastic-type helmet, and though it's more protective, it traps a lot of the heat.
No small consideration on a day like this. Up among the men, David Scott in second place had something new to worry about himself, as Scott Tinley, 23-year-old from San Diego, third place a year ago, had moved up into contention and was closing rapidly on Scott.
David Scott has ridden for almost 4 hours alone, and to have Tinley come up beside him, have someone to talk to, get his mind off the pain and the loneliness of a 112-mile ride, that's got to help him and also Tinley.
And though it may be easy for concentration to wander in the oppressive heat, with the temperature rising to more than 100 degrees in the lava field, surely Scott has perked up his attention now. Midway through his second triathlon, this is the first time David Scott has ever seen someone go by him on a bicycle.
Volkswagen introduces the amazing new Quantum, German technology that is bound to be copied. Other makers will scrutinize Quantum's patented thinking axle, hoping to unlock the secret to its agility. They'll analyze Quantum's aerodynamics, seeking a clue to its economy. They'll even burrow into Quantum's comfortable interior. 5 years from now, how will you tell the original from a copy? Look right here.
The 1980 Winter Olympics. Hockey team captain Mike Ruzioni helped clinch the gold for the U.S.
I'm Mike Ruzioni, the artist. Budweiser asked me to paint with these to help raise funds for America's Olympic athletes. Now you can own my painting and help our athletes train for 84. After all, there are a lot of Picassos. There's only one, Ruzioni.
Call 1-800-325-1488 for more information.
The producers of the hit comedy movie Airplane are crashing onto television with Police Squad, premiering March 4th.
Going down that wide open highway.
Some guys have a flair for living life to the fullest.
Guys, how about a little R&R?
You can see it in the beer they drink, Miller's Special Reserve. It's carefully brewed and aged to taste rich and full-bodied with less bitterness. Taste the best in life, Miller's Special Reserve.
Good service isn't giving people what they expect. No, it's giving them more than they expect. Avis knows that. So when you make a reservation, Avis makes a commitment, and they honor it.
Morgan?
See, even if you're 6 hours late. Now, you might be willing to pay a little more for this service, but at Avis, you don't have to. Trying harder is still the best way to do business.
Channel 9, we bring good news to Denver.
It was just past 1:30 when the leader, Kim Bouchon, reached the hotel that marked the end of the bicycle segment, got ready to turn his thoughts to the marathon run. It had now been more than 5 hours since Bouchon left the water. Only once, when he doubled back from Javi on the bicycle, had he seen his closest pursuers, David Scott and Scott Tinley. Under normal circumstances, he might have been wondering, where are they? How far back? But on this particular day, a film crew which had been covering the event, not ours, had passed information back and forth among the leaders. So Bouchon surely knew right now that he had exactly a 9-minute lead over Scott and Tinley.
It was surprising how much energy Bouchon still had. After riding 112 miles, he was able to get off his bike and right away start jogging. To do that after 112 miles is very hard.
Bouchon at first turned toward the wrong dressing room. With good humor, he righted himself, went into the men's room, and prepared to change shoes. Out on the course, Scott Tinley had fallen back a little bit into a lockstep formation with David Scott, and the two of them passed water and sponges back and forth in a spirit of friendly cooperation.
Both Tinley and Scott were riding special made-to-order racing bikes that can cost at least $1,500, but they can make a difference compared to an off-the-rack model of up to about 30 minutes in a 5-hour race.
It is a long day, but for Bouchon now, every moment counted. As Tinley and Scott pressed down on the hotel, he hurried to change into the proper clothes for running the marathon. At this point, the event took on an air of comic chaos. As Bouchon started out of the parking lot, he was accompanied by his close friend, Mark Montgomery, actor Bruce Dern, here to work with the ubiquitous film crew, and 2 other members of the crew. The 5 of them, looking like a basketball team in search of a practice court, moved out of the parking lot and onto the marathon course. It was doubtlessly with some degree of insecurity that Bouchon started the 26-mile trek, remembering that 1 year before he had reached this point in the race high up in the standings, but had finished down in 11th place. Remembering that one of the men chasing him, Scott Tinley, had run the fastest marathon in the field the year before in finishing 3rd, and knowing that no one could know for sure how much David Scott might have improved as a marathoner since he ran 3 hours and 20 minutes 2 years before.
Though Tinley and Scott were climbing slowly up this hill, it's important to note that cycling is so much faster than running, and it's important that these 2 riders worked hard to gain time on Bouchon.
We may never know whether it was helpful to Kim Bouchon at this point to know exactly how great his margin was, or whether it simply created pressure for him. As he began his marathon trek, Marty LaCourie was in a van just in front of him.
It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the temperature on the road is over 100 degrees. And when most marathoners start a race, even the best have doubts as to whether they can finish it. Kim Bouchon has been out competing now for over 6 hours as he starts this marathon. Unfortunately, the beginning of the course takes him over some fairly rough hills. And having just gotten off a bike, his thighs have got to be in knots. He needs some time to loosen up, work into the race gradually, but unfortunately in this race, it's too close to walk at the beginning.
With the same kind of information from the independent film crew that Bouchon had, Scott and Tinley knew exactly where they stood when they pulled into the hotel. There was one critical difference. Scott Tinley had never won the Ironman Endurance Triathlon, and David Scott had. Another look at the marathon course map Artie Johnson showed you earlier. Out of the hotel, through the town of Kailua, to a point beyond the airport, and then back. The hills are situated early in the course, but the rest of the race must be run in blinding sunlight and oppressive heat. As Tinley started out, he was able to make a brief pit stop, and yet still hold an edge over David Scott, who was clearly slowing down. Tinley looked a little stiff, but his form was already better than that of the man he was chasing, Kim Bouchon.
Well, Tinley's form is the form of a 2:30 marathoner, and here, quite clearly, he was very confident, knowing that he was the best of the 3 in the running event.
Pat Hines still held the lead among women. At this pace, she could reach the hotel within a half hour.
Pat kept good form throughout the race. She stayed down low to reduce her wind resistance into the headwind, but it did look like she was struggling. Julie Moss, who was in 2nd place, though, looked really fresh. She smiled at us, but she was up on the bars and she was catching a lot of wind compared to Pat.
When Scott Tinley left the hotel, speculation was that it should take him at least half the marathon course to make up Kim Bouchon's big lead. But on this day, Scott Tinley made a shambles of those predictions. He caught Kim Bouchon with still more than 20 miles to go in the marathon, and he went past him almost as if he were standing still.
The reason for that was that he ran his 3rd and his 4th mile in under 6:30. That's better than 3-hour pace for the marathon. So he really went out very quickly for the first 5 miles of the race.
At this point, it seemed obvious that Kim Bouchon was fading and would no longer be a competitive factor in the race. The only question that remained as far as Scott Tinley was concerned was, had he gone out too fast? Would he have used up too much energy in catching Bouchon to be able to hold off David Scott later on?
For over 25 years, the most powerful tool of the 20th century was kept in the back room. Until Wang opened the door to office automation. Wang put the computer at everyone's fingertips by simplifying data processing, revolutionizing word processing, and combining them on one system. And the future looks even brighter, because at Wang, we never stop opening doors.
The ugly stick rod by Shakespeare. It fishes circles around every other rod.
If you're wondering where you stand on your family insurance, the State Farm Family Insurance Checkup will make you feel better. It reviews your family insurance, homeowners, auto, life, and health. There's no obligation, nothing to pay for the service, and the people I talk to say they're glad to find out what protection they have. Talk to your State Farm agent about the Family Insurance Checkup. It can make you feel a lot better, too.
And like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Saturday, the awesome strength of super heavyweights will lift more than spirits in the World Weightlifting Championships. Dragsters roar in the Winter Nationals and the grace and beauty of National Figure Skating Champions. Saturday on ABC's Wide World of Sports after the Professional Bowlers Tour on ABC.
4 o'clock. 8.5 hours into the endurance triathlon, and now there were competitors spread on bike and on foot all along the road from Hawi to the town of Kailua. At the head of the pack, Scott Tinley had less than an hour to go if he could maintain his pace. He had eliminated any semblance of competition, and with the town of Kailua now coming back to him on the horizon, the memory of David Scott was farther and farther behind.
In an event where most competitors try and explore their physical limits gradually, Scott Tinley went out in the marathon and just ran the first 10 miles as hard as he could, under 70 minutes.
He was holding his form as he headed toward the finish. Behind him, David Scott, who ran with a more loose-limbed style, must have been accepting the depressing reality that second place was the best he could hope for. Meanwhile, there had been a lead change among the women. 23-year-old Julie Moss, the former college student from Los Ojos, California, had moved ahead of Pat Hines. For Hines, the worst expectation had now become a reality. She slumped to the side of the marathon course, unwrapping the tape on her stress-fractured foot, hoping only that it could feel a little bit better and she could somehow go farther.
Which meant Kathleen McCartney now moved into second place.
For several hours now, more than 500 competitors, some of them superior athletes, some of them less well-equipped but equally as determined, had labored in 100-degree heat. In the preceding year, organizers had been astonished at how few problems the heat had caused. But this day was another story. It is the nature of people like this to push themselves far beyond their natural limits. Pat Hines, her stress-fractured foot now throbbing painfully, pressed onward in hopes of finishing. And one man stood astride the field. His superiority, the product of a competitive and training background, quite possibly far advanced of that of anyone else in the field. In the course of the preceding year, Scott Tinley had sought out no less than 14 endurance biathlon and triathlon events to be certain that he would be ready for this one. By now, he had made it clear that he was.
Before I use my head and feeties, I get the Eaties for my Wheaties.
Before a day of doing splitties, I get the Eaties for my Wheaties.
The Eaties for Wheaties, that undeniable, irresistible urge for the crispy, crunchy, whole wheat taste of the breakfast of champions.
Before I swing for the bleacher seaties, I get the Eaties for my Wheaties.
Part of your good breakfast.
Volkswagen introduces the amazing new Quantum. German technology that is bound to be copied. Other makers will scrutinize Quantum's patented thinking axle, hoping to unlock the secret to its agility. They'll analyze Quantum's aerodynamics, seeking a clue to its economy. They'll even burrow into Quantum's comfortable interior. 5 years from now, how will you tell the original from a copy? Look right here.
What's more natural than pasta and beer? Ah, what's more natural than natural light from Anheuser-Busch? The beer with a taste for food. It's natural and it's light. So when you want to leave room for more...
What's more natural than
natural light?
ABC Sports. This is why we are recognized around the world as the leader in sports television. Important sporting events from around the world, from the most acclaimed production team in television sports, ABC Sports. We've made a commitment to excellence.
In the streets of Kailua, thousands waited for Scott Tinley to cheer him on toward what was now a certain victory and a possible record for the triathlon event.
In every endurance race, the competitors ask themselves, first, can I finish the race? And secondly, can I beat the competition? And once the competition is broken, finally, can and really do I have the desire, now that I've won the race, to go for a record?
Later, Scott Tinley would say that it was not important to him to break David Scott's time record of 9 hours, 24 minutes, 31 seconds for this event. But as he moved toward the finish line, the lift in his legs, the change in his tempo suggested to the crowd that a record was what was on Scott Tinley's mind. And as he got closer to the finish, it became an absolute certainty that he would get that too. Scott Tinley's victory in 9 hours, 19 minutes and change was the product of fierce determination and intense preparation for the event. Some would say a humorless attitude toward it. It was nevertheless an overwhelming victory over a quality field by a young man who must now be regarded as the most outstanding endurance athlete of his kind in the world.
Hey, water. Water. I'll take a sponge.
Still more than 2 miles from the finish, David Scott was looking for something to hold back the heat. His training schedule had been awesome, but perhaps the experience of not having been here at Kona the year before had been the difference between him and Scott Tinley in this race. Behind Scott, there had been a battle for third place between a man named Mark Sisson and a familiar-looking towhead from San Diego. It was Jeff Tinley, Scott Tinley's brother, who now held third.
They just announced a new record. Thanks, Bill.
Scott, congratulations.
Thank you, Jim. Thank
you. You began the marathon segment with one man to catch. Did you have any particular strategy about catching Bouchon, or did you know that he was going to come back to you?
I figured he would. I knew he's not that good a runner. But this kind of race, you never can tell. I went out hard enough until I got him, and then I just kind of sat back a little bit and just watched the rest of the field.
Was it important to you to go after the record? You have broken David Scott's overall record for the race, and
it doesn't mean anything. I was just happy to win.
Well, in this kind of heat, which incidentally has taken much more of a toll on the field than the heat did a year ago, this is quite an accomplishment. Was it more difficult this year, or did you learn some lessons last year that helped you to do as well this year?
Yeah, I learned how to ride a bike.
The men's champion had been determined. The women's had not. Julie Moss was still running, and it was far from over.
And so on they ran. A little bit later on Wide World of Sports today, we'll show you how that competition turned out. And after you've seen it, I really think you'll agree with me that it's one of the most moving and really agonizing things we've had on Wide World in quite a while. Really something to remember. Now, it's less than 2 years until the Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, Yugoslavia, and this month, an ABC sports team was there, surveying camera positions for the various events and looking around the city. This is what they saw, a city more than 700 years old in the geographic center of Yugoslavia, a place where East meets West in a melange of 28 nationalities, a city of churches and mosques, where the cry of the muezzin is as familiar as the sound of church bells. Along the Bosna River lies the route taken by the Archduke Ferdinand on the day he would be assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, an act that lit the fuse for the First World War. The old city hall is Viennese in architecture, but in the city you can find styles from many cultures. In February of 1984, athletes from almost 40 nations will add to the international character of Sarajevo in the 14th Olympic Winter Games. Here in the Dinaric Alps, the ski racers will compete. Our survey team found the combined bob and luge runs at Trebevic well under construction. The cross-country trails are cut on the Igman Plateau, while downtown, a new hockey and figure skating stadium is being built. Less than 2 years from now, the opening ceremonies in Koševo Stadium before 60,000 people at the Winter Olympics of Sarajevo. ABC Sports will be there to provide more exclusive coverage than ever before. We hope you'll join us. Well, we're going to take a little break right now, but when we come back, you'll be seeing Sugar Ray Leonard defending his World Welterweight Championship. The commentary was done by Howard Cosell at ringside that night.
Good service is no big thing. It's a million little things. That's why every Avis car gets 9 safety checks, 7 comfort checks, and 6 cleanliness checks. Matter of fact, the average Avis car is better maintained than the average family car. See, Avis knows good service is making a big deal about little things. Right? Trying harder is still the best way to do business.
Head & Shoulders doesn't have it. Selsun Blue doesn't have it. Only Denorex has it. An extra relief medicine to stop dandruff itch. You can feel it tingle.
All 3 have one medicine for dandruff itch, but only Denorex adds a second medicine, an exclusive anti-itch medicine many dermatologists recommend.
You can feel it tingle. That's extra relief medicine, and only Denorex has it.
In regular or New Mountain Fresh Herbal, Denorex stops dandruff itch with an extra relief medicine.
Should generic drugs require FDA approval? Monday, watch ABC's World News Tonight.
Going down that wide open highway, gonna live life my way.
Some guys have a flair for living life to the fullest.
Guys, how about a little R&R?
You can see it in the beer they drink, Miller's Special Reserve. It's carefully brewed and aged to taste rich and full-bodied with less bitterness. But to really appreciate it, you'll have to try one. Taste the best in life, Miller's Special Reserve.
Gonna live life my way. Yeah, yeah.
An hour of 9 News, weekdays, 6 a.m.
These are the bright lights of the Strip in Reno, Nevada, as it embarks upon a project to become a lowercase Las Vegas. And enthusiastically joining in the project are these many people, 7,000 of them, a packed house in the Centennial Coliseum. They are here to see a welterweight championship fight. And hello again, everyone. It's good to have you with us. It will be Sugar Ray Leonard against a challenger named Bruce Finch, up from oblivion and quite apparently about to return to it in what has the look of a mismatch. Under any circumstances, they welcome this bout here because the last championship fight was in 1910, and that too was a mismatch as they brought Jim Jeffries out of retirement to go against Jack Johnson, and Jeffries paid the price. Maybe now, tonight, there could be a miracle, but it is to be doubted. Finch has been knocked out by the likes of Pete Ranzani, Larry Bonds, all great names in boxing, and of course by Tommy Hearns, the Motor City Cobra, in the second round. Leonard you know about. He seems in superb shape. The swift hands, the swift feet, the punching power seems to be much too much for Finch. Under any circumstances, Leonard has lost only once, that June bout in 1980 in Montreal to Duran, and that a questionable decision. Wants to go on to the very pinnacle of his division and the total history of that division in boxing. Now here's referee Mills Lane with the ring instructions.
Mills Lane. Okay, your seconds, I want you to go light on the grease, okay? Light on the grease. Now you've had your instruction. Any pressure from Mr. Finch's corner? Any pressure from Mr. Leonard's corner? Shake hands, let's get it on, boys.
Mills Lane with the instructions. Mills has done any number of championship fights, including 2 Larry Holmes fights, including the great one against Kenny Norton. There is the tail of the tape for you to observe. According to the promoters, Finch's record, 33-1. The bell for action in round 1. Remember, scoring on a 10-point must system. Referee has no voice in the scoring. The 3 judges, Herb Santos, Sabrino, Dwayne Ford of Las Vegas, and Henry Ellis Puru of Sacramento, California. They'll be doing the scoring. Sugar Ray taking it very easy in the early going. One right by Finch got in. Minute into round 1. Fighters have had 4 common opponents. 3 of them have knocked out Finch. Sugar Ray Leonard has knocked out all 3 of them. Each enjoyed a decision over Rafael Rodriguez. Minute and a half into this, the first round. Sugar Ray appears to be going down. Mills Lane taking Leonard out of the way. Overhead angle again. Left, right gut in there, and then a left, and Finch ready to go. Wobbly. See him there staggering, and Leonard just measuring him. As I said earlier, a mere exercise for Leonard. And we will be back with Sugar Ray Leonard in just a moment.
Volkswagen introduces the amazing new Quantum. German technology that is bound to be copied. Other makers will scrutinize Quantum's patented thinking axle, hoping to unlock the secret to its agility. They'll analyze Quantum's aerodynamics, seeking a clue to its economy. They'll even burrow into Quantum's comfortable interior. 5 years from now, how will you tell the original from a copy? Look right here.
What's more natural than natural light?
Now I'm asking you, what could be more natural than Natural Light beer on the grand day of the wearing of the green? Ah, Natural Light from Anheuser-Busch. It's the beer with the taste for food and fun. Why, it's just the thing for the party, you know. On the day when everyone's Irish, give 'em a kiss. But before you do, ask 'em this. What's more natural than Natural Light?
Last night, I dreamt I was as big and strong as a weightlifter who could do no wrong. My teeth would grit, my muscles would ache, but oh, could I lift with world titles at stake. Then I drove a hot rod car. I didn't have to go too far. But gee, I made some speedy trips in the Winter National Drag Racing Championships. I was also one of the national champs on ice in a special performance that was very nice. I wish I wasn't so short, you see, so I could be on ABC.
Ray, there's something I gotta say to you honestly. We've been together since your birth, really, at Burlington, Vermont, and through Montreal. And you have become the most compelling figure in boxing since Muhammad Ali. I really don't think an opponent like that does you, your stature, your reputation any good. What do you think?
Well, I think you're wrong, Howard, mainly because I think that the fights such as the Finch fight here, it helps me out mentally. It makes me understand, it makes me realize that I still can get in perfect shape, as boxing critics call an insignificant fight. I got up, I prepared myself physically and mentally, and I was able to do away with Bruce Finch.
Come in here, Ray Jr. Were you satisfied with your dad tonight?
Yes.
Thought he waited maybe a little bit too long.
No.
Did you get angry when Finch connected once? And at that point, I said you were a class fighter, he was a club fighter, and you absolutely unloaded on him.
What happened, Howard? I warmed up in the back quite well.
He also butted you.
Yeah, a couple of times. I came into the ring, I was a little cold, although I warmed up in the back. Finch landed some good punches, but it was still didn't have that much leverage on him. He punches with the arms. I knew fully well that as the rounds would progress, I would get stronger, my punches would become more accurate. I worked the body, and I knew fully well he was susceptible for a left hook.
All right, what next? Will it be Stafford?
Yes, I'm quite sure. I think he's here already. I would love to fight Stafford. I think something that will materialize late May or maybe early June.
So you want to keep active. And then the inevitable question, now a total redundancy. Benitez or Hagler or what? What's really left?
I really don't know, Hal. I got to be very sincere with you and the public. I just don't know. Mike Trainer is pretty much negotiating contracts, fights for me, and I'll take them as they come. I like to be as active as I possibly can for 82, but it's been very, very difficult in making any concrete agreements.
Well, I know of one who can beat you. You can beat up your daddy, can't you?
Yes.
There you go, Ray. There you go. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
So long, Ray Jr. The story from the Centennial Coliseum in Reno, Nevada. Sugar Ray Leonard, still the welterweight champion of the world. Who figured otherwise? Now, let's return to the conclusion of the triathlon. Our announcers, Diana Nyad and Jim Lampley.
6:20 p.m. It had been more than an hour and a half now since Scott Tinley had accepted his victory wreath. And as she turned onto the streets of Kailua, Julie Moss was still leading among the women. But Julie Moss had problems. More than an hour before, she had held a significant lead over this woman, Kathleen McCartney. McCartney might at times have been able to catch a faint glimpse of Julie Moss far off in the distance, nearly a mile away. But even at that point, the signs of fatigue were already evident on Julie Moss.
As Kathleen's strength built throughout the day, Julie's deteriorated. She began walking, eating, and drinking more and more frequently. And as she ran, she carried her arms lower and lower. Julie no longer just wanted to finish. She wanted to win.
Hey, you guys! Find out how far back she is for me.
Julie Moss had come to the endurance triathlon to enter and hoping to finish. She never conceived of herself before the race as a potential contender for a victory. Now that was very much on her mind.
Her arms stopped pumping, her stride shortened. In the vernacular of the marathon runner, Julie Moss had hit the wall. But she kept on.
As Julie Moss made her way over the last 3 miles into the town of Kailua, darkness began to settle over the town. On the streets near the pier, A large crowd waited, expecting to cheer Julie Moss onto the finish line.
Once in a great while, a motorcycle comes along so unique and innovative in styling and performance, it simply stands alone. The motorcycle, Suzuki's incredible GS 1000S Katana, a unique example of the bold thinking that goes into every motorcycle Suzuki builds.
The United States Postal Service handles 300 million pieces of mail a day. Well, that's their job. But that doesn't mean you have to put your important business letter into that pile. Now you have an alternative. Introducing the Federal Express Overnight Letter. It costs only $9.50 when you drop it off, and it gets delivered practically any place in the country overnight. Absolutely, positively.
Monday on That's Incredible, a stunt woman attempts a 190-foot world record jump, and a Paris commuter goes to work on his toes. Then, Ryan O'Neal and Candice Bergen in a network premiere.
You have to come to terms with who you are.
From Love Story to Oliver's Story, Monday.
Tomorrow on ABC.
6:35 p.m. Julie Moss had but a quarter mile to go to become the top woman finisher in the 5th Ironman World Endurance Triathlon. For several miles, she had been getting encouragement and support from an Australian runner named Rowan Phillips. But surely he wondered now, as would anyone who saw her, whether she could make it.
Of Julie, with her legs shot, her knees buckling under her, her thighs as out of control as rubber bands. She still had the heart to want the victory. A little more than 200 yards to go. thighs. You may also lose control of some involuntary muscles, like your bladder and your bowels. But she still didn't quit.
Now less than 100 yards to go. Almost 6:40 p.m. There were 25 yards left to go. So near, so far. On the ground, Julie Moss looked at the finish line from 10 yards away. Diana Nyad waited, expecting to interview the winner. There was one more surprise.
Kathleen, turn around this way just for 2 seconds. I know you're exhausted. You had a long day.
I know. I had a very long day.
You were so tough.
I started out kind of weak, and I pulled on strong. The second half of the bike, I really felt great. The run, I felt like $1,000,000.
Did you know how far behind you were, though?
Well, I knew I was really far behind. When I got off the bike, I knew I was really far behind. And I just said, I'm going to give it everything I've got. And I just pushed and pushed and pushed.
And you plugged. You have the record. You have the world record.
God, I'm so excited, and I can't believe it. I'm the happiest girl in the world.
How do you feel physically?
I feel good. I feel great. Maybe I didn't run fast enough.
The ordeal of Julie Moss, which, by the way, inevitably recalls to us the story of Durando Pietri. Remember, he was the little Italian runner who led the marathon in the 1908 Olympics, coming into the stadium. Obviously didn't know where he was. Officials turned him in the wrong direction first, then the right direction. Eventually carried him across the finish line, an act which cost him the gold medal, which then went to Johnny Hayes of the United States. Something, that endurance triathlon, isn't it? There was nobody there to record the reactions of Durando Pietri, but Diana Nyad was able to talk to Julie Moss a couple of hours later.
Julie Moss, it is 8:07 p.m., approximately 2 hours after you heroically came across the finish line.
I hadn't planned on it being heroic at all. I planned on a nice, clean, unnoticeable sweep. And it just didn't turn out that way. It was so close, and I wanted to win so bad. I think this is the first time I've ever wanted something so badly that I was going to crawl on my hands and knees to get it.
Which you did.
Yeah.
We all have a very dramatic, emotional memory of the finish.
Oh.
What is your memory?
My memory is it was so close, and it was slipping out of my hands, and I had to finish. There was no way I was not going to finish. I decided that. I mean, I could crawl. I mean, that was my last straw. And when I finally, my legs gave out the last time, and I could see the line, I just started moving for it. I wanted to win it. I thought heard the crowd, and I knew they wanted me to win it. I mean, here's this girl who can't walk, and God, let her win it at least. And that didn't come true, but it was close. So.
Did you know precisely where Kathleen was?
The whole time. I'd say from about 13 miles into the race, I knew she was on. I kept hearing splits on her, so she was chasing me, and pretty soon she was 3/4 a mile behind me consistently. The feeling of just having your body collapse on you. Well, you're an endurance athlete. You've hit that wall time and time again. It's incredible. And I laid in this tent here thinking, what is going on with I mean, everything shut down. Everything cut loose and shut down. It was a pretty scary experience.
The long day was over for some, still going for many. In the women's competition, Sally Edwards and Lynn Brooks tied for third place. In the men's, Jeff Tinley was third, and David Scott finished second in a time better than that of last year's winner. Greg Redden of Australia ran his very first marathon here and finished a respectable 7th. Kim Bushong struggled throughout much of the marathon, but nevertheless held on courageously and finished 8th. Pat Hines also showed her courage, but in the end she was unable to finish. 14-year-old Rodkey Faust walked glassy-eyed through the night and finished in 17.5 hours. 60-year-old Ove Sandelius, deputy governor of the Swedish province of Orero, took until 3:15 a.m. to finish, but he got home. And so did Jim Gayton, a man who 3 years ago was paralyzed from the waist down in a skiing accident. And so did Ralph Hetker, running on a surgically constructed knee completely made out of steel and plastic. All in all, 537 of them finished, more than 90% of those who entered the water at Kailua Pier at 7:30 in the morning. Travel arrangements made through and a promotional fee paid by United Airlines. United flies more people to Hawaii than any other airline. That's what Friendly Skies are all about.
Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of sport, the thrill of victory, and the agony of defeat. The human drama of athletic competition. This This has been ABC's Wide World of Sport.
Brought to you by the 1982 Quantum. Nothing else is a Volkswagen.
Well, the winning streak of tennis star Ivan Lendl finally came to an end today. After 44 consecutive victories, Lendl was defeated by Yannick Noah of France in the final of a Grand Prix tournament in California. Our congratulations to this year's repeat superstar champion, Ronaldo Skeets Nehemiah. Next Saturday, Professional Bowlers Tour at 3:30 Eastern Time. Then, Wide World of Sports with weightlifting, drag racing, and figure skating. Don't forget ABC's World News tonight, Sunday on most of these stations. I'm Jim McKay. I'll see you next week.
This is ABC.
We asked Roger Staubach to find out how people spell relief.
How do you spell relief?
For acid indigestion, R-O-L-A-I-D-S.
For heartburn, R-O-L-A-I-D-S. Rolaids really does spell relief.
Like a sponge, Rolaids antacid medicine consumes 100% of the acid required to give millions 100% relief.
How do you spell relief?
R-O-L-A-I-D-S.
For millions of Americans, Rolaids spells 100% relief.